Welcome to another episode of How I Discovered My Gift with yours truly, David D. Simons. I'm excited to have today's guest on, Stefan Ciancio. Hopefully I said the last name right. I know I got the first name right. That's my guy, Stefan. And he has a remarkable background, right? So he's a former mechanical engineer. I was a mechanical engineering major. He actually did the whole thing. And then he found himself yearning for a life of freedom. And so he fired his boss in 2015 and began working for himself. How many of y'all can relate? I'm sure you can. And then went from struggling to sell courses, coaching, agency services, and software to selling 7 figures worth thanks to the power of webinars. Excuse me. Webinars transformed his business. And so he wanted to figure out how he could help it transform other people's businesses as well. And soon he co-founded WebinarKit. If you haven't heard of WebinarKit, you're going to learn a lot about it. I'm a fan of the work that they do and Stefan does with a friend of his that had the same vision. And they went to create all-in-one tool that would help people transform their businesses through webinars. Now, running WebinarKit, he runs the WebinarKit day in, day out, and he helps others explode their own businesses with the webinars as well. So I want to give a big shout out. Thank you for coming on the show, Stefan. It's truly an honor. It's truly a blessing, man, to have you on.
Thanks for having me, David. Really happy to be here.
Yes, sir. So I want to dive right in, right? Because you know how I feel about webinars. I built my whole business around it as well. It's been something that is powerful for us. But I want to actually go back. We're definitely going to get into webinars, but I want to go back a step, Stefan. Take me to childhood, right? Like, what was it like as a childhood as Stefan, and what was that experience to take us to who you are, a little bit about who you are?
Definitely. So I grew up, I'm first generation born in America. I mean, my parents came as kids, my mom from Greece, my dad from Italy, but essentially I was closer to the whole immigrant upbringing than I think a lot of Americans. And I think that I subconsciously kind of saw the attitude that, you know, my grandparents had. And then, you know, even like my dad growing up, he was a workhorse. He would work during the day and come home and always be doing things around the house. And even like my mom's father was a contractor and he worked until he was, very old. And I think that there's just like this hustle mentality, like this entrepreneurial hustle, like we got to make something, we're here. And I don't know if it subconsciously got implanted in me, but I've always been like very entrepreneurial. Like when I was 14, I had a website where I literally would write letters to baseball players, get their autograph, and then I would sell it online. And not only did I sell the autographs, I sold an ebook at age 14 with the players' names, addresses, how many cards I sent them, how many cards they signed, and I would collect money orders through the mail and then send people the ebook. And I was doing forum marketing to sell these ebooks before I even knew what forum marketing was. So, kind of interesting. And then, I kind of lost that entrepreneurial spirit a bit when I went to, what I call the life script. So, I went to college, I got a job, and, I was working this job that I was miserable at, all my coworkers were miserable at. And, it's like that classic, work your ass off for the rest of your life and retire on a fraction of what wasn't enough for you to live off to begin with. And that was, I think, I'm fast forwarding beyond childhood a bit, but when I got past college and got my first job, it was about 2 years in that I was like, I knew that this path was not going to be for me. It wasn't going to work. And I knew that there was going to be a different path in my life.
Wow. This is so amazing, right? Like, because they say that most entrepreneurs really started in their childhood. Like, there's something that they build, and you were, wow. I mean, I have to go back to that. Like, what gave you that, like, insight, like, to think like that at such a young age, to build, like, okay, you knew that the value of having these signed baseball cards and signed autographs and things. And take us into that a little bit. Like, what was going through your mind as a child to even structure that way and think that way? Because I always say sales is bound in the heart of a child.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It really, like, I think my dad was somewhat of an influence. My dad, when he was a kid, he always had this story about how, growing up, they were very, very poor. And he would literally go and collect bottle caps so he could go buy comics. So he would wait until all the kids after school, like they'd litter their soda pop or whatever. And he'd go pick up all the cans and go like deposit them into bottle deposit so that he could go buy comics. So maybe subconsciously that story kind of resonated with me, but I always liked collectibles, and I think maybe through him I saw that they could have some value. And as far as what wanted me to build a website around them, I can't really tell you. It's just something inside of me that I'm like, I want to do this. I want to build. I just always liked to build, build things and see them grow,
Beautiful. So that brings me to, because this whole show is about how people discover their gift. When you really think about it, Stefan, what is your most dominant gift?
That's a good question. I would say I'm very good at when I feel that someone is let's how I phrase this. When I have people in my life who are proving to me that they are like really great, amazing people, I'm super loyal to them and I'm super giving. So if you're in my life, generally I try to be very giving. I try to really be there for someone, and I think that's also why I run a business where it focuses on serving others. Outside of WebinarKit, side note, I run this community in Astoria, Queens, where I live, and I don't remember if we had discussed this privately or not, but essentially, I realized that adult friendships were lacking in this country, and there was less and less sense of community. And I wanted to build a place where people could be able to go. It's like, okay, maybe your friends moved away or you're still single, and whatever it is, like, you want to have a place that you could go where there's going to be people there. And, this used to be church. This used to be bowling in the 50s. There was more of a sense of community. But these days it's much more hard to find. Not as many people are doing that. So I wanted to create the place where the people who were not doing those other things had a place that they could go. Right. So I do that. And I think it all just kind of comes from like where I see a need, I get so fixated on it. And I'm like, I need to service this need. And I think maybe that is my superpower. When I see something missing for others, I feel like I have to like go fulfill on it, and that happened with WebinarKit, happened now with Astoria Connect, the group that I run. So I'd say if I had to figure out where my superpower is, probably somewhere in that realm.
Wow, that's phenomenal, man. That's phenomenal. So take us through this journey, right? You got tired of working. I mean, and for the reality of it is mechanical engineers, I mean, make good money coming out of school. So like I just want to kind of dig into that a little bit, because I know a lot of people are in that position right now. They followed, like you said, the life script. They got the job either their parents or society told them to get. They went to school. What was it in you that you just felt like you just couldn't do and stay in that mode?
That's a good question. I think after 2 years of being at my day job, I just kept feeling myself, is this really it? Everyone around me was miserable. And, I traveled a decent amount before becoming an entrepreneur. But maybe it's because I had like parents that weren't the typical totally American parents. And I just feel like I always felt like quality of life in America seemed lower. Like people were overworked, they had no freedom, they're stuck in this. I mean, it's a little different now with remote work, but especially at the time, it was like everyone was miserable. Like everyone was like, oh, can't counting down the days until retirement, only 26 more years. And I'm like, I just got here, here less than 2 years. I just, it felt, and what's interesting is when I got there, right, I've always been the type of person that when I see an issue, I want to try to figure out how to fix it. And I remember I found this opportunity, and I'm sure we'll get into like how I got onto where I'm doing now. But like essentially, I found this Kindle opportunity at some point where it was like publish Kindle books, make passive income, and it really appealed to me. I remember showing it to my coworkers, and I was shocked at not a single coworker was even remotely interested in doing it. They laughed at me. They were like, it was like a joke to them, where it was like, oh, what are you going to go sell drugs? And I'm like, no, like this is like a real thing. You could do this. You could build online things and sell them. And like, I just feel like for people who were so miserable about how much they really hated their lives, they really didn't want to do anything to try to change it. And I think that really appealed to me, or it really woke me up, where I was like, all right, I think honestly, I just have to find the people that really do uh, like understand it, the people that get it. And that's where I think I saw how important community really was. And the first community for me was actually, if you remember, the Warrior Forum. You
Oh
remember that?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
started at the Warrior Forum. I would go on it, like, after work when at my old company. I would just go home and go on the Warrior Forum all day, and I started learning about all these like strategies, and I was trying to figure out what was legit, what wasn't. And eventually I stumbled into some Facebook groups. There was a lot of entrepreneurs around the world on Facebook, and I started like just kind of reaching out to people and being like, hey, I'm new, I'm trying to learn this, I'm trying to learn that. And some people, kind of don't really want to hear from you. Some people are friendly. So
Right.
there were people who were friendly enough to start like talking to me and kind of engaging me. And, I kind of slowly found my way from there. But I actually forgot what the original question was, David. But
No, no, that's exactly in alignment, man. Of just like what got you out of that, thinking like everyone is following this script, and you
oh,
just
yeah.
were you just had this something insatiable inside of you. And like I said, I can relate growing up in immigrant household, and there's a different thinking pattern. There's a different quality of life, and I'm sure. Did you travel as well as a kid to either out of the country and experience the world in different places?
We would go to Greece in the
Yeah.
summers, not every summer, but yeah, I mean, it was a completely different lifestyle over there. People were
Right.
relaxed. They weren't. It wasn't a work all day and then live. It was like you saw the difference in quality of life. And
Sure.
I think that's always appealed to me. And I always have said I feel like America is a great place to make money, but I think you can enjoy your money here, but I think you should try to enjoy your money overseas too, because it's
Yeah.
much cheaper, it's much
Yeah.
more fun. And it's I think it's good to be balanced, right? Like, I don't really like to live in absolutes. I think that
Yeah.
I try to see the best in different places. And America to me is the place to make money. And if you want to go take that money and go travel somewhere else, you absolutely should.
Definitely. So in a sense, to break out of the matrix, right? Which is what you were really doing, right? As you're leaving this world where I hate to call your former coworkers robots, but a lot of people were robots, and just like it was for me in corporate America, what the warrior form, it sounds like it was part of your development. What else did you do? Because I just know you're a person of personal development. What else did you do to develop yourself, to build the skill sets to become who you are? What was that process? What was going on? What were you reading? What were you studying? What was all that?
Absolutely. So when I started, around when I was getting ready to quit my job, so like 2013, 2014, I started my job 2012. I think in 2014, I knew early 2014 is when I was like, I got to figure out my escape plan. This isn't going to work. And excuse me, at the time, I was interested in mindset, but it was from the standpoint of uh, okay, there's all these guys online that are making money. They're saying to read these books. So I started just buying books about like Grant Cardone, 10x, and Psychology of Selling by Robert Cialdini, and they were definitely. I read a few of those, and that definitely helped. It just gets you in this mindset of like how to sell, and those were important on my development. But I would say the really big breakthrough came in 20. I left my job 2015, moved actually. So 2015, I did a year from 2016 to 2017 in Manhattan. 2017 to 2019, I moved to Philadelphia because business was kind of shaky. And while I was living in Philadelphia, I did this thing, and we've talked about this, called the Landmark Forum, which was a very powerful personal development workshop.
Yeah.
It's 3 days. You're in a room with like 100 other people, and you just get extremely intimate and vulnerable about your life. They lead you on this journey. And I would say that the best way to explain it to you is, if you went to therapy, it's kind of like 15 years of therapy crammed into 3 days. But that was where I started really reflecting internally to myself, and the identity I constructed for myself of how I see the world, and what things have happened to you and how those things influence how you perceived them, and then B, based on those perceptions, created a way to live in the world. And I think that it was the first time I was ever so introspective to myself. And a lot of great things happened after that. My business definitely started to take off. I moved back to New York in 2020. There were hard times ahead with COVID and stuff, but like, I think having a tool set on how to deal with these issues helped me get through it much easier. As humans, there's always going to be upsets, and it's a matter of knowing, I think, how to deal with them. And there's not a human alive who doesn't experience upsets or doesn't get upset by things as much as they might tell you otherwise. It's just a matter of how do you react and how do you deal with that. But I think that in general, personal development became a really powerful piece of my life, and I try to remember it. And then these days I also really like stoicism. A lot of those principles are similar to Landmark, but I kind of focus more on those things. And if I ever feel, what's kind of cool now is you can go to Chat GPT and ask it to this is kind of cool. You could go and be like, in the words of a stoic leader, speak to me about this problem. It's actually really good, the responses that you get.
How about that? I didn't even do that. I have to check that out. Yeah. So that brings us to okay, you've developed yourself, gone through the corporate cycle, right, and realize this is not enough for me. There's more to life than this. You start. Is WebinarKit the business you start right out the gate, or talk to us about the genesis?
Yeah, so I mean, if we're going all the way back, age 14, baseball cards. When I was working my first job, I remember there was a coworker who told me that he was selling things online, that he got at garage sales, and it really appealed to me because I was living in Connecticut. A lot of my friends I went to UConn, they were moving out of state. I was getting a bit lonely up there, and I was like, I need a hobby. And I don't know, I was like, well, if this guy's selling stuff on eBay, I think that urge to sell came back that I always had, where I'm like, I want to go out and I want to just sell stuff. So I started going on Facebook Marketplace. I went to Goodwill. I would just go anywhere, garage sales, and find stuff, and I would start selling it. And this was before I even knew who Gary Vee was. I was just doing this. So I was just going and selling stuff, and I grew it to I think the biggest month I ever had was 1,000 profit. I was only doing it for a few months, and it was fun. It was a side little thing, but I hated having all this stuff in my apartment that I had to ship. And I was collecting junk because obviously some stuff didn't sell. So it's you just have this big pile of junk in my apartment. I'm out of school working my first job, and I was like, this kind of sucks. Right. So I ended up seeing this ad on YouTube because I would watch videos of other people who were doing the eBay thing that would post their hauls. And one of the related videos was how I make 6 figures a year publishing Kindle ebooks. So it was some other internet marketer who was selling the product, and it appealed to me because I wanted to be able to create assets that I didn't have to keep replenishing supply. And I was like, digital assets are way more easy because you could create it once and then you could just sell it as many times as you want. And that concept really, changed my whole perspective. And so I bought the course. I started publishing these Kindle ebooks. I was building a passive income. And then funnily enough, I saw that the guy who was selling the course was making 6 figures a year publishing his books, but he was, according to him, making 7 figures a year selling the knowledge on how to publish the books. And this is when I had a little realization. I'm like, there's a lot of money in selling your knowledge. Right. So I was like, okay, what do I know? And what do I know how to do? What can I sell a course on, right? This is where my brain went. And ironically, at the same time, around this time, one of the other little side things I was trying is I built a niche blog in the dog niche, and I was using I watched some podcast. I was just very interested in this is when I was newer, and I was doing the eBay thing, but I was doing the Kindle thing, and I was seeing all of these other things people were doing to build income online, building little, niche websites. And I was in the whole, internet marketing makes you money mindset, where I'm like, well, I got to learn SEO and I got to learn ads and, AdWords. I was more on passive income. How do I build passive income? And one of the things I did was build this dog niche site. And on this dog niche site, I actually used Pinterest to drive visitors to it. And I ended up driving over 1 million free visitors from Pinterest to this website. And I was like, bingo, I know what I'm going to make the course on. And I created a Pinterest marketing course. And I was the only guy, I think, in the niche. There were a few others that were selling Pinterest knowledge. I was the only guy at the time, which is kind of funny. But I built this course. I started launching it on, I had known the Warrior Forum. So Warrior Plus was pretty big at this point. And JV Zoo. I started publishing guides on Pinterest marketing there. I started learning about affiliate marketing and how can I publish courses and get other people to promote them. I became friends with all of these marketers, and that was really where things started to solidify for me, because I was like, okay, I'm building a newsletter, I'm selling courses, things started to solidify. And I was doing that primarily when I left my job in October 2015. Now, business was going pretty good. It was a bit inconsistent, but I replaced my day job income. I quit, and I was like really all in. Things were going pretty good. When I moved to Philadelphia, though, from 2017 to 2019, and especially having done Landmark, I started just thinking bigger, and maybe naturally my brain just developed a bit more. You kind of, the longer you do something, sometimes you just you progress. Over time, it gets easier.
Sure.
So I expanded the course because I had a lot of people that were coming to me and saying, "Do you have like coaching or something? Because the course is not. We need more help, or can you just do it for us? We're a company or whatever. We don't want to be sitting here learning Pinterest." So that's when I expanded the course into an agency where I had a coaching program, and I had a marketing agency that would do the Pinterest service for people.
Wow.
So, and the way in which I realized that I was selling my courses too low. I was selling them for like $37, $27, $15 often. And, I had a little sales funnel behind it, but it was really about getting leads and selling them on other people's stuff. I'm like, I'm just going to raise the price of my own stuff. So I started selling the program for $700 instead of like 15 to 27. I spruced it up. I gave people a bit more stuff for that. But essentially the way that I learned, I had started learning about Russell Brunson and in webinars and everything. And the way in which I was able to successfully grow that business was with webinars. So at the time, a friend of mine who was from high school, he was a software engineer, and he, watched what I was doing the last few years, and he, had his own little side projects he was working on. But at the time he came to me and he was like, "You're doing these webinars, you're automating them, you're traveling while your webinars are running automated, and you're getting sales, and you're able to go do all these other things with your automated webinars running." And he's like, "I feel like I could build us a tool that's better than the ones that are already out there." And I was like, "You think so?" He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, let's do it." So we built WebinarKit. We launched it January 2020, which was ironically good timing given the whole world pandemic. I know. And then it was off to the races, and I shut down my Pinterest agency about a year and a half in, and just said, I'm focusing entirely on WebinarKit. That's going to be my main thing. And we've been smooth sailing ever since. I mean, running a SaaS is a lot harder than info, I've learned. It's just a higher level of like more things you have to worry about, but I think the payoff is potentially greater. So we're in the process now of just really focusing on, the tool is mature at this point. We're always trying to improve it, and we're just in the process of continuing to keep the ship afloat and continue to scale. So, but that's in a nutshell, the whole process.
That's phenomenal, man. It's like, as you said, as you progress, your mind expands to solve things and do bigger things. And, like, I am so curious, like you're building WebinarKit, and you're already utilizing webinars. Did you start to still continue to do webinars with your software as well, or you're like, you know what, forget this, I'm just gonna go all in on the software? How did that happen?
Yeah, so like we still run webinars regularly. Like we have one coming up actually on Friday, and they're still a very pivotal part of our business. They work. We've used them to sell. I've now used them to sell information courses, coaching, agency services, and now SaaS. So, and I've built. I along the journey, I occasionally have taken clients where I've built them webinars or helped coach them to build webinars, and I've not had a single person not have success when they created their own webinar. So anyone who's thinking about creating a webinar should absolutely do it. It's getting easier even now. I think the tools are maturing to make it easier for you to run your webinar and even create your webinar. And even then, there's lots of people out there like yourself and others that can be really good at helping you with everything you need to get started. But I would say like anyone who hasn't done it yet needs to start. It's a very, very powerful tool in your business.
Speak more on that, because you said that webinars changed your business, like, and then you wanted other people to have that same experience. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like when I was selling my courses for like $37, I mean, that was great. I was making money, but like I realized that I needed to scale higher. And I was like, well, if I'm going to be selling at $700, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, I need to have some way for people to convert. And it's so funny. I have a friend, he runs a matchmaking service in the dating niche, and he has a dating app. And I remember he surveyed his list at one point, and he was like, yeah, I asked them if they want to buy coaching, and I said it was going to cost dating coaching, and I said it was going to cost $2,000, and he's like, I'm not going to launch it. I'm like, why? He's like, oh, they all said it was too expensive. And I'm like, you didn't convert them yet. You got to build something that's going to convert them. You just if I walk up to some guy on the street and I'm like, hey, you want to pay me $2,000? There's maybe one in a million, right? So I'm like, no, you have to convert people. And that's the purpose of the webinar, is to get in front of people, show them who you are, build trust, authority, likability. And that's what a webinar does. It builds trust, it builds authority, it builds likability. It lets people relate to you more than your competitors. And when you do that, when you build those three things, trust, authority, likability specifically, people will buy from you. They become your fans. I've run webinars where I've had people that have come on a webinar in May, and then I ran another one in September, and then I ran another one in January. And the guy would get on the call with me on the end of the January webinar and be like, hey, I watched you this date, and this date, and now today I knew I was ready to buy from you. So those, especially when you combine it with touch points, like you're just building a relationship with people through a webinar, one-to-many selling, right? So, best comparison is with sales calls, but well, actually, let me back up a bit. So when I was selling these things from $700 to $5,000, I was like, I don't really want to be doing sales calls. I hated sales calls, and I don't want to be talking to people one at a time. I'm like, this is really stressful. And I'm not some big Fortune 500 company, especially back then, where I was like, I'm just a guy who's trying to make some money. So I was like, I don't really know how I'm going to get on all these sales calls every day. And I wasn't particularly interested in building a team. So I was like, webinars. So webinars allowed me to limit the amount of phone calls I had to take if I was doing a phone call on the back end. And through doing that, I was able to get on calls with people who had already learned about me, already learned about what I've done for other people, already learned about the product I was selling, and they were, all of their objections, because the other thing is your webinar should take down all the objections, they were ready to buy. And I'm like, perfect, let's sign that. You know what I mean? Sometimes they just have that one last hiccup or that one last question. They just want to get on the phone with you. And then from there, it's like, okay, this is a real person. It all matches what was on the webinar. Let's just do it. So that was all really powerful for me. And it's so funny. Even with one of our offerings, we have a white label offering, and we were doing sales calls for a while, one-on-one demo sales calls. We hired, a little team, and the sales were not great. And I had to manage the team, and I had to train the team, and I had to do all of these different things. And I was like, this is subpar results. On top of that, you have to pay the team, right? Commissions and whatever. Then I said, you know what? I want to try something. I'm just going to go back to doing a good old-fashioned once-a-week demo webinar. People could come on once a week. There's a set time, and I'm going to just show up at that time, and I'm going to run my webinar, and I'm going to answer all of their questions at once. I'm getting way more trials for the white label through that webinar than I was ever with the sales team. So it's such a powerful tool. It could be used with sales teams and calls. You could replace sales teams and calls, but webinar is just, if you can understand the power of it, it's just such an absolute game changer. So yeah, it saved my business in a lot of ways. And pretty much when in doubt, run a webinar. If you need more sales, right? Just if you have a small audience, get on a webinar. If you can get 10 people on a webinar, and you might get a sale for 2, 5, 10K, depending on what you're selling. You don't need big numbers. You just need connection, right? And the next best thing is an in-person event. That's going to build the most trust. But a webinar is the best thing that you're going to be able to do online for your sales. And if you could get 1,000 people, 100 people, even 10 people in a room at the same time, and put the right information in front of them, build the right trust, build the right authority, build the right likability, you're going to get sales, is really what it comes down to.
That's so good, Stefan. What do you say? We actually had an ad where we were talking about a few things about webinars, and this guy was like in the ad, that's so 2020, webinars are dead. And I'm sure you get these statements or hear people say this stuff all. What do you say to those people that feel like and think that webinars are dead?
That's fine. More for me. I mean, webinars are not dead. I mean, I think it's so funny. There's a lot of people in the space that I've noticed this. There's a lot of people who will not, they're like commentators, right? They're not actually participating. They're not on the field. They're not running things in their business. They're just on the sidelines watching everyone else do it. And they're commenting like, oh, webinars don't work anymore. Oh, this has changed. That has changed. And it's like, you're still on the sideline commentating on what's actually going on. And it's like from the outside, because you've never done anything, yeah, it looks that way. But like when you're in your business, have things evolved? Absolutely, right? I think that webinars on average are a little shorter now. I think on average you need to have more touch points in your funnel. I think on average, you want to get it's more about being personal now versus having like this big webinar. I think it's about smaller, more intimate connections. But that said, the underlying mechanisms have not changed. And it's like I've been doing the same things in my business since I started my business in 2014, 2015. I'm doing building an audience. I'm getting that audience to view my webinar. Once they view my webinar, they understand everything they need to understand. And then they're a lifelong fan or whatever, you follow or whatever. They see the value in what I'm trying to bring to them, so they stick around. It's the same thing. Is it getting a bit noisier? Yes. Does that mean that the ship has sunk? Not even close. Like it's still going. It's not changing. The little nuances will evolve over time, and as marketers, we will stay on top of that. But I'm doing the same thing I've been doing since I got here.
Man. Thank you for sharing that. I think people, a lot of people are unaware, so that's really, really cool that you brought that out. If you could speak to live webinars versus automated, right? And your thoughts on that. And obviously WebinarKit, and then go into WebinarKit as well, and some of the features and the cool things you guys do.
I'm actually glad you asked that question, because I'm in the unique position to have access to a back office where we can see certain trends on what's working with webinars. So one thing we've noticed, we delved into a little bit of the numbers. And it's one thing we found really interesting is that live webinars are obviously great. They have their place. They're good with having an intimate group at a specific time. You can really build engagement, and I think that has its place in your business. Now, that said, one thing we found really interesting with automated webinars, on average, automated webinars get you 1.5x the amount of people to consume your webinar, and thus theoretically should lead to 1.5x conversions. We believe that the reason for this is due to the on-demand nature that the world is going. Not everyone is around these days to be at a specific place at a specific time. And essentially, when you give something to someone on demand, you just get more viewership. So based on our data, those who have signed up for an automated webinar, and this is actually another really interesting thing, the automated webinars on average have been a bit shorter, and then the live webinars are a bit longer, and you get less viewership. So actually, you know what, while I have you on, let me just, I'm just going to pull up these numbers. I'm going to read them to you because it's just like one small, otherwise so I'm not going to remember the exact, let's see here, find it. Yeah, it was so fascinating. Let's see here. Okay, I believe this is it. Maybe not. Give me one sec. Let's see. Where is it? Here we go. Okay, I got it. Okay, so essentially what we found was that, okay, here we go. Automated webinars, average duration, 68 minutes. Live webinars, average duration, 100 minutes. Registration conversion rate for an automated webinar, so, on average across everyone on our platform, 33%. Registration conversion rate for a live webinar, 40%. However, the biggest discrepancy is that the attendance rate for an automated webinar was 55.37%, where the average attendance rate for a live webinar was 31.26%. So you have a massive difference in the amount of people that are attending an automated webinar versus a live. And I believe that that is just simply because it is on demand and they're able to show up and watch it when it works for them. So the conclusions on that are that automated webinars see 7% less registrations, but they see 24% more attendees. So to do some quick math, this means if 100 people come to your webinar registration page, 33 on average are going to be registering for an automated webinar, but 18% are going to view that webinar. On a live webinar, you're going to have 40 live registrations off the 100, but way less people are going to show up. So it's going to be a 31% view. So you're actually going to get 12% of people to watch that webinar. So you're actually getting a 50% increase in webinar viewers compared to live webinars. So does this not mean that live webinars have their place? Of course they do. But automated webinars, especially if you don't want to go live all the time, they get a 50% higher amount of people on average across, again, these are averages. So this is going to be the variables are going to be how good your marketing is, how good your copy is, who your audience is. But on average, we are seeing a very substantial increase in the amount of people that are viewing automated webinars versus live webinars.
Astounding data. Wow. Thank you. I mean, I just, listeners, I just want you to know, like, you are getting data not from just someone that's doing webinars, an infomarketer, though he is an infomarketer. You're getting data from behind the scenes of all their users, and they have a very vast program. In fact, I had to share this in 2020. I think it was 2020. I made it a priority for all of my coaching students to have WebinarKit, right? Because you guys provide a reasonable price solution, right? Because it can be costly. People are like, well, I already spend this money on ads, and I had to spend all this money on this and pay this software every month. And you guys have an amazing deal. So I just want listeners to really know what you gave them, where that comes from, a place of where that comes from. Like, take that data seriously. So I appreciate you sharing that. So if you could, man, with the few remaining moments we have, and I got two questions for you. But the first question is, tell us about WebinarKit, how people can get it, how they can get plugged in, and some of the amazing things about it.
Absolutely. Well, we started it because we were unhappy with the current solutions and we just wanted something that actually works. Ironically, the solution we were using before, what we didn't like about it as marketers was that it would, especially for the automated software, well, really for the automated software, if you said, oh, I'm going to watch an automated webinar at 2 p.m., you would go in at 2 p.m. and you'd still have to press play. So I'm like, if this is an automated, it's supposed to be a simulated presentation, when do you ever have to press play on something that's live? So it was like, this is weird. Like, I'm like, you're adding a step for people to do. It's probably hurting conversions. And like, we were like, we can build something that fixes this at the very least. And we did. And from there, it's just kind of like, well, we can get a software that does this and we can get a software that does that. And we just wanted to simplify and make a smoother experience for everyone. So we do automated webinars, we do live webinars. And more recently, we've even added a white label, which means you can rebrand the whole software to your own brand and sell the sub accounts to your clients and customers, which adds a whole new revenue stream to your business. We also plug into High Level directly. You can combine our white label with theirs if that's something you want to do. If you know what white label is, if you know what high level and white labeling are. But essentially, that's WebinarKit in a nutshell.
Well, we got some things to talk about because I didn't know about the white label part. We are going to definitely talk about that. That's really cool.
Okay.
The last question we always ask to listeners, you weren't prepped on this, is, Stefan, what's the difference between one's gift and one's purpose? One's gift and one's purpose.
I believe that your gift could be used to help you achieve your purpose.
Love that. Your gift can be used. Simple, straight to the point, my friend. I appreciate you. This has been remarkable. Listeners, go get it. We're going to plug the WebinarKit in the show notes and YouTube, everywhere this interview is going to be posted, and take advantage of it. I'm telling you, it's great software. I can attest to it to myself personally as a webinar guy. Excellent software, excellent work that they've done, and even beyond that, Stefan is just an excellent guy. He's a great person, right? So that's yeah.
Thank you,
man. So thank you so much for being on the show, brother. and we appreciate you sincerely.